Dear friends, welcome to today's special Sunday service. Special because we have a guest speaker today, Swami Chidbrahmananda from our Washington DC Center. Many of you who were present yesterday here for the retreat know how wonderful a speaker and a teacher he is. He joined the Ramakrishna order in 1999 and got his monastic vows in 2012, and having spent many years in the Vedanta Society of Northern California in San Francisco, he moved to the Vedanta Society of Southern California. Just northern to southern, state remains the same, and then came to the Vedanta Society in Greater Washington DC, and there he is conducting classes, giving lectures, and without wasting much time, I welcome him and request him to begin his talk today.
Good evening. It's been a great weekend so far with you. Each one of you that I've gotten to talk to has been really a joy. I've never felt so much permission to play and to be playful, and so much acceptance and love going on here. It was quite nice to enjoy that and to remember that this morning. You've given me a lot of confidence. Normally I get quite scared getting up here and doing these things, talking. I want to go through the Katha Upanishad tonight. It's probably one of the most pertinent scriptures to me that I've read so far. One that I feel a special relationship with it. I feel like it really opened up to me, and it really kind of, poked at me and taught me some things that were really helpful and sort of unveiled some of its secrets to me, or I felt that way about it. So I'm excited to share that with you. Now I prepared an hour and 15-minute lecture, and now I know I've got 40 minutes. So I'm going to leave out my long introduction and my big long poem that I had collected here. And I'm just going to read the last verse of this Hafiz poem, where he says, "I water each day a favorite potted plant of the Lord's, this earth. Ask the friend for love. Ask him again, for I have learned that every heart will get what it prays for the most." This is a very pertinent place to begin. So with that, we're going to open the Katha Upanishad. We've got our stage curtain closed. It parts, and the first scene has Vajrasravasa, Nachiketas's father, performing a sacrifice. So we've got the scene with him offering a sacrifice of everything that he has. So he has literally collected everything he owns and is putting it in a big pile, and just for the sake of sacrifice, we'll say he's burning it. I don't know what he's doing with it, but he's putting it all in a big pile and putting it there, and we're seeing this on the stage for the first time. I was very happy with that idea, sitting and reading the Katha Upanishad and having it happen in a third party in front of me, but then something tickled in the back of my mind and said, no. Indeed, the stage curtain has opened, but we're not in the audience watching Nachiketas's father make his offering. We are, in fact, the subject of the Upanishad. And the Upanishad is pointing out that it's us who is making this offering of everything that we had. And how does that mean? What do we mean by that? See, in the verse 1, it says that his father, desiring rewards, performed the Visvajit sacrifice in which he gave away all of his property, and he had a son named Nachiketa. Okay, all of us are involved in this sacrifice. All of us are giving all that we have to get more. You see, Nachiketas' father wasn't doing it out of renunciation or out of it, even really, I don't know exactly. It just says he wanted for more reward, desiring rewards, he performed this sacrifice. The whole world is engaged in this. Every one of us, we're giving how many hours of our day to work, to get money, to spend on more vacations, to go out for more food, to buy more clothes, to have bigger families, to buy bigger cars. So we're throwing our entire life into a sacrifice for our own reward and for getting more. So the curtain opens on us, performing our sacrifice in the day, going through our day collecting more and more things and spending more and more time to get more and more of these things. And we see here that in verses 2 and 3, he says, when these gifts were being distributed and faith entered into the heart of Nachiketa, who was still a boy, and he said to himself, joyless surely are the worlds to which he goes, who gives away cows no longer able to drink, to eat, to give milk, or to calve. And this was an interesting verse to me because I at first I took the simple approach and said, well, Nachiketas' father must not have been giving the best cows. He was giving all secondary equipment. But I read that verse again and it said that he was giving everything he had. So I thought that poses a problem. You can't criticize somebody who's giving everything they have. You can't criticize what they're offering if it's all they've got. And Nachiketas, it says that faith entered into his heart. So his motive was faith. And I thought, is that true? Would faith entering into somebody's heart make them critical of somebody else's sacrifice? That doesn't make sense. That can't be what's going on there. So we had to sit and think about it. And I was reminded of a disciple of Swami Vivekananda when he talked about faith, Vimalananda. And I read this yesterday, and I warned you yesterday that I was going to use this paragraph in every one of my lectures from then forward, and so here it comes. Faith does not mean a sudden effervescence of sentimentalism, nor a dazzling display of intellectual feats. Faith has no concern with these passing shadows which vanish away before the tremendous facts of life. It stands unmoved in the innermost depth of the heart as the one vital principle of all thought and action, in the midst of the varying destinies of earthly existence. It is the intuitive perception of an eternal relation with something which by its overwhelming prominence throws into shade the ever-vanishing shows of the world and draws us away from its diversified occupations to a close touch with that permanent reality. So faith entering into Nachiketas' heart, faith entering into our heart, makes us aware of this eternal relationship between ourselves as we think of ourselves, as this body growing old, living its life, and the sense of permanence and eternity that we somehow feel or somehow assume or know must exist. Because interestingly enough, there is nothing in this world that would suggest eternity to us. There is nothing in this world that would train an empty mind on the concept of eternity. So that idea must be in us already. It must be in our nature already. And Nachiketas was coming to this awareness. And he wasn't criticizing his father's sacrifice in particular, because it just doesn't fit in the story. What he's criticizing is the idea of sacrifice at all in this world. That everything we have to offer, everything that we could possibly think we could give as a worthy sacrifice is not a worthy sacrifice. It is all temporary. It is all passing and fleeting, here one day and gone the next. When confronted with this idea of that eternal relationship with this divine presence, with pure love, when faced with that reality, he came up empty-handed. He saw that his father's whole life, that my whole life, that your whole life, and this ongoing sacrifice of our constant investment in more, our attempts to accumulate, our attempts to enjoy, to try new things, to learn new things, this constant feeding, that it was a meaningless exercise, that it was an unworthy expenditure of life, something so precious and something so beautiful, to spend your whole life just eating, in a sense, filling hungers of different types through the senses. So he begins to understand this, and he pulls himself into the equation. He says, well, where does that leave me? And he goes to his father and says, what about me? Where do I fit in this? What am I? What am I? And his father, of course, is busy with the sacrifice, doesn't pay that much attention. And so 3 times he asks it. Finally, his father turns to him and said, you're given unto death. And Nachiketas is kind of stunned with this, walks away with that. And I was too. I was like, wow, what provoked his father to say that? The commentary that I read said that Nachiketas had irritated his father, and in anger his father had cursed him and sent him to death. And I thought, oh, really? There's no other context for that there. You'd have to read a lot into that verse for that to be really what happened. So I wasn't satisfied. I thought, what could this have been? What is Nachiketas talking about? And I began to realize, thinking in terms again of ourselves. If we're the ones on the stage and this is our situation, our parents gave us birth, indeed, and our parents have taught us the sacrifice of how to survive in the world, by spending our life accumulating and working to survive and to grow a family, to do all the things that are necessary. And with that birth, our family, our mothers, our fathers gave us to death. Because of that birth, we're given to death. And Nachiketas' father was telling him the truth. What will become of you? You'll die. You've been given unto death. With your birth, I gave you death. You've done the birth, now death is coming. Nachiketas is kind of stunned into a moment of deeper reflection. And he begins to think to himself, what's going on here? He says, among the many, I'm not the first, and maybe the middlemost, but I'm certainly never the last. What purpose of the king of death will my father serve today by thus giving me away to him? So he's inquiring, and he's looking into the meaning of his life and trying to figure out where his place is in that. The root of discrimination is beginning to take hold. He's beginning to look at his life in reference to a deeper meaning, to what is it about? Who is he? Is he a part of this temporary show that's fleeting along, or is there more? So he goes to the kingdom of Yama, to the realm of Yama. Actually, it doesn't say, it doesn't, at least in the verses here, he's just suddenly in the realm of Yama. And one of the classes that we've had at Washington, D.C., we spent a lot of time talking about how did he get to the realm of Yama, and where was that, and how did he, what kind of journey was that? And, in contemplating that, it occurred to me, it's like, well, he didn't go anywhere. We don't have to travel to go to the realm of Yama. Where do you think you're living now? Every single being in this existence is going to do a full-out Sashtanga Pranam to death at some point. If death rules anywhere, he rules here. This is his kingdom. So here we've come, sitting in the kingdom of Yama, in his waiting room. He has not yet visited us, has not yet come to us, because we're sitting here. We're not on funeral pyres yet, we haven't been buried yet. So we're sitting here in the waiting room of Yama, in his realm. And we're all Brahmanas. What makes us Brahmanas? We're asking the questions that Nachiketas is asking. We want to know our purpose. We want to know, why are we here? Who am I? What brought this about? So here we are in the waiting room of Yama. He comes to us. And he asks us, he realizes, okay, so you're sitting in my waiting room, and I haven't paid attention to you. What can I give you? I give you 3 boons, So he goes to Nachiketas, and Nachiketas says, okay, 3 boons, what do I want? And you could answer this question without even reading the scripture. If I came to you and said, okay, death is in front of you, and he's giving you 3 boons, what are you going to ask for first? Well, first I'm going to ask that my family is fine. My dad thinks well of me, he's not angry with me, that you're going to take care of all of them, And really, I'd prefer not to die. So not only that, I'd like him to recognize me when you send me home. So you can decipher your first concerns. When you think about dying, what are you thinking? You're thinking you want your family to be taken care of. And you'd really actually prefer not to die, if you didn't have to. So he gives him that first boon. And Nachiketas then gets a second boon. And this one he says, in the heavenly world there is no fear whatsoever. You, O death, are not there, and no one is afraid of old age. Leaving behind both hunger and thirst, and out of reach of sorrow, everyone is happy in heaven. You know, O death, the fire, the sacrifice which leads to heaven. Explain it to me, for I am full of faith. The inhabitants of heaven attain immortality. This I ask as my second boon. Yama says, I know well this fire sacrifice which leads to heaven, and I will explain it to you. Listen to me. Know this fire to be the means of attaining heaven. It is the support of the universe. It is hidden in the hearts of the wise. So in his second boon, he's concerned about himself. Okay, we got my family taken care of. They all love me. I prefer not to die, but if I die, I want to go to heaven. I want it to be a nice experience, no fear. I want you to take care of the fear factor. That's our second boon as well. I want to go to heaven. I want to be in a good place when this is there. But he wants to know about this sacrifice, how to attain this eternal life, how to attain this well-being, this eternal peace. And death, Yama tells him, I know the sacrifice, and I'm going to tell it to you. You would think, or I thought when I was reading, as soon as I read that, I was like, oh, cool, okay, get out the highlighter. We're going to learn about the sacrifice, what I really want to know here. And I was astounded to find out that death doesn't tell him, or doesn't tell us. He tells Nachiketa, it says, that death tells him how many bricks and where to build and all of this. But he doesn't tell us, doesn't put it in the scriptures. And that left me thinking, what's the point of this? Why do we even write this Upanishad if you're not going to give us that piece of information? Somebody asks death how to get to heaven, and he tells them, and he doesn't write it down. What's going on with that? So I read it several times over, and I thought, I have to be missing something here. And what I was missing here was that death does give us plenty of hints. Here. It says that Yama told him about the fire, which is the source of the world, what bricks were to be gathered for the altar, and how many, and how the sacrificial fire was to be lighted. Nachiketa too repeated all this as it had been told to him. And then Yama, being pleased with him, spoke again. High-souled said to Nachiketa, I will now give you another boon. This fire shall be named after you. Take also from me this many-colored chain. So there were two things. In verse 14, he says that this fire, that this sacrificial fire for attaining this immortality, he says it is hidden in the hearts of the wise. He says it's hidden in the heart. So immediately I thought, well, maybe the reason they're not telling us about bricks and about how to build and how to start the fire and all of that is because the Upanishad's pointing at something deeper. So I took that as a clue. Take that as a clue. It's hidden in the heart, this sacrifice. And then he goes on down, he throws in an extra boon. He says, not only that, Nachiketas, I'm going to name this fire after you. And I thought, okay, a fire that burns in the heart that's named after me. And I thought, well, the only other fire that I've heard about is that one the size of your thumb that exists inside you, where God meets the material plane in this form. And this form is named after me, been given my name. Well, several different names. At this point, it's Swami Chidbrahmananda. So you have burning in your heart a fire named after you, which is your sacrificial fire. And what goes on that fire? What is the sacrifice you offer? Everything you eat, everything you look at, everything you listen to, everything you touch, that is your offering on this sacrificial fire. And by becoming aware of that, and by knowing what you offer, you attain heaven through that awareness and through following the scriptures in what he follows here, in what death has to say. So in your life, develop that awareness that you are a living sacrifice, that you are a walking altar, as it were. You carry within your heart that place where God meets the material world, and that interception creates you, this burning fire, this burning place of worship, and that it's up to you to worship at this fire, to put the things into your mouth that you would offer to God, to look at the things that you would offer to God, to listen to the things that you would offer to God. And all of these things, when they're placed on that fire and they burn, what is the smoke that goes up from that fire? It's your prayer. It's your prayer to the divine. It's what you are asking for. It's the sum total. This fire burns in the cave of the heart. It is the inner shrine upon which you place the offerings through your senses. Its smoke is the sum total of your prayers. In 1 Thessalonians 5:17, that's a book in the New Testament of the Christian scriptures, the Christians are given a command to pray without ceasing. And that inspires a book called The Way of the Pilgrim that I know many Vedantists have read. It made its way through a couple of the centers I've been at. And in that, the pilgrim goes looking for the meaning of what does that mean to pray without ceasing? And from this scripture here and from this idea of this burning sacrificial fire that's going on, to pray without ceasing means to realize that you are in fact praying without ceasing. That everything that you do is a prayer. Everything that you offer to your senses is an offering to that divine fire burning here. And you get the results of that. God always answers your prayer in the affirmative. There's a rumor going around that sometimes he says no and sometimes he says yes. That's not the case. God always says yes. But he says yes in its proper proportion. You know, if you ask for if you ask for fame and then decide to sleep through the audition, you've prayed two prayers that are canceling each other out. God will give you the sum total of those two prayers. So as you live your life, as you spend your day to day, putting things into your eyes, listening to things through your ears, know that those are turning into prayers, that the offering, the sum total of those things in your heart are putting up a smoke of prayer, of incense to the divine. Is it a sweet-smelling smoke? Is it an incense? Or is it a stench? What is it? Have you paid attention? Do you even remember what you looked at purposely today? Do you remember what you read purposely today? What videos did you watch purposely today? What websites did you go to purposely today? Those were your prayers. Were they a prayer for peace? Were they a prayer for knowledge of the divine self? Were they a prayer for freedom? Were they a prayer for love? Were they a prayer for the betterment of humanity? What were they? What did they give you? What would that smell like as it goes up this evening before the divine? Do you know? Have you been aware? Did you know today that you were praying without ceasing? And are you prepared for the answer of yes to that prayer? Are you prepared for what's coming to you because of what you prayed for? In the Complete Works, Swamiji says, he talks about this. He says, what is the efficacy of prayer? Well, he didn't say that. One of the devotees asks him, what is the efficacy of prayer? Swamiji says, by prayer, one's subtle powers are easily roused, and if consciously done, all desires may be fulfilled. But done unconsciously, 1 perhaps in 10 is fulfilled. Such prayer, however, is selfish and should therefore be discarded. So these prayers, he's refining it even further. Not only is he talking about conscious prayer. I mean, if you pray consciously, he says all of your desires can be fulfilled. The scriptures talk about the ability to focus the mind, that one-pointedness of thinking, and it's because of this. If you are one-pointed in your offering, if you burn the offerings on this fire in you, live a life that is unanimously and uniformly asking for a given thing, it will be yours. It will be given to you. You know, if you want fame bad enough, how many interviews? I talk about fame because I'm coming from Hollywood, but if you listen to enough of these interviews with these great stars, I mean, they talk about how intensely they wanted what they got, how hard they had to work for what they got, how many rejections they had to go through and endure before they got what they wanted, because they were single-minded, single-focused. They kept putting that same piece of wood on that fire, that same thing, and put up that same prayer over and over and over again, and it's theirs. They've attained that. Most of us end up somewhere in the middle, you know, mundane day-to-day jobs, because we put up 1,000 different things, like a little of this, a little bit of that, you know, a little bit of that. Kick it all on there, and at the end of the day, we get what we get. You know, I'm working at McDonald's and living in a basement sublet, you know, down in the outskirts of D.C. Who knows? And ultimately, that's utterly unimportant. But the thing is to do that consciously, and if you're going to do it consciously, Vivekananda is suggesting that you do it for the good of humanity. He's suggesting that you've got this power. You've got this power to have any prayer fulfilled, answered. By focusing and being conscious about it, he says you can rouse that power in you. You can focus that power in you. And if you're going to focus that power in you, do it for the sake of others. When you begin to live like that, when you begin to live consciously with this place of worship that you've become, when your life becomes a conscious prayer, your life becomes a conscious dialogue with the divine. It becomes a daily, regular interaction. You know that you're in constant communication with the beloved, with your highest ideal. It begins to focus in, and you begin to think about and know what it is that you're looking for, understand what you want, and you put it in there. And the Master tells a great story in the Gospel that highlights this idea. The Master, smiling, says, a Muslim man, while saying his prayer, shouted, "O Allah! O Allah!" Another person said to him, "You're calling on Allah. That's all right. But why are you shouting like that? Don't you know that he hears the sound of the anklets on the feet of an ant?" You know, when you realize that God is here, that he is a partner in your thought, that he is a partner in what you see, a partner in what you hear, a partner in what you think, when you realize that intimacy, that he can hear the anklets on an ant, that he's that close to you. If you haven't been conscious about your sacrifice, that could put you in a state of panic. You know, that's almost like finding out that in your room at home there's been a camera that's been broadcasting on the front of the building everything you've been doing for the last, you know, X amount of time you've been living in that space. You're like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? What was on that screen? You know, that when we approach the divine, you know, in a serious way or in a straightforward way, that's our first condition. Like, oh my God, you know, oh my God, what am I? What have I done? And that's when our knowledge of grace comes in very handy, like that. When the mind is united with God, one sees him very near. One sees him in one's own heart. But you must remember one thing: the more you realize this unity, the farther your mind is withdrawn from worldly things. That's a beautiful promise. Thakur says, but be aware. You may come to this sacrificial fire with the idea of fulfilling all of your desires. You may start these prayers with the idea of becoming famous or becoming rich. But he said, no, that when you draw close to the divine like that, when you open that eye inside, when you become aware of that intimate relationship with divine love, with divine bliss, when you begin to feel and realize that nature, what God is, what he's like, how he inspires, those qualities we read from Corinthians, that God is always patient, always giving, always hopes, always believes, never speaks ill of others, keeps no record of wrongs. Be careful, he says, because when you draw close to that, your mind begins to withdraw from these things that you thought you wanted, begins to be allured to higher things, to higher ideals, to perhaps living a life for the welfare of others, for the betterment of the world around you, and not for the filling of your own desires. I mentioned yesterday that great proverb in the Old Testament that says, the eyes are never filled with seeing, and the ears are never filled by hearing. So how long will you continue throwing those things on the fire, thinking that they will satisfy you, thinking that at some point your eyes will be satiated, some point your ears will be filled, and you'll be happy? The master goes on, he walks in on the devotees. Naren, or Vivekananda, is there in the room. And he says, the master, when he appeared, coming to learn the cause of the fun that was going on in the room, he went over and gently touched Naren and plunged him into deep samadhi. So he goes over, so he walks in, the master walks into the room, they're all playing and having fun, and he casually out of nowhere just goes over and touches Naren, who would become Swami Vivekananda, and throws him into a spiritual consciousness. I like this idea because I think of us as playing together in this room, going on about our daily lives. And we draw close to the Lord and we start becoming aware of these things. And at some point, while we're just gaming around, having a good time, Thakur is going to touch you in that innermost space and throw you into a whole new set of consciousness. And this is what happened to Naren. It says the touch produced a magic effect, and Narendra entered a new realm of consciousness. He saw the whole universe permeated by the divine spirit and returned home in a daze. While eating his meal, he felt the presence of Brahman in everything, in the food, and in himself too. While walking in the street, he saw the carriages, the horses, the crowd, and himself, as if made of the same substance. After a few days, the intensity of the vision lessened to some extent, but still he could see the world only as a dream. While strolling in a public park of Calcutta, he struck his head against an iron railing several times to see if they were real or if they were a mere illusion of the mind. Thus he got a glimpse of non-dualism, the fullest realization of which was to come only later at the Kasipur garden house. This is why the master warns you. This is why the master tells you, yes, play, come close, become aware of life, begin to discriminate, see things in the light of their temporary nature. Come close, and I will touch your heart in a way that will show you how huge you really are, how big love really can be, how amazing the experience of living was meant to be when you take off the blinders, drop off the limitations, fall away from those restrictions that you've called yourself. Nachiketas is now ready for his third boon. He said, there is a doubt about a man when he is dead. Some say that he exists, and others say that he does not. This I should like to know, taught by you. This is the third of my boons. Yama said, on this subject even the gods formerly had their doubts. It is not easy to understand. The nature of Atman is subtle. Choose another boon, O Nachiketas. Don't press me on this. Release me from that boon. Nachiketas said, O death, even the gods have their doubts about this subject, and you have declared it to be not easy to understand. But another teacher like you cannot be found, and surely no other boon is comparable to this. So Nachiketas wants the truth. He wants to know about death. He wants to know about his real nature. He wants the bottom line of the story. And death is like, no, ask something else. Ask something else. And Nachiketas says, no other teacher can be found that's like you. I like that idea, death as a teacher. And not only just a teacher, but a teacher like none other. None other can be found. Swamiji says, "There is no time to deliver a long discourse on renunciation, but I shall very briefly characterize it as the love of death. Worldly people love life. The sannyasin loves death. Are we to commit suicide then? Far from it. Suicides are not for lovers of death. We often see that because if they don't succeed, they most often don't try again. We must die, that is certain. Let us die then for a good cause. Let all of our actions, eating, drinking, everything that we do, tend toward the sacrifice of ourself. You nourish your body by eating. What good is there in doing that if you do not hold it as a sacrifice to the well-being of others? You nourish yourself with your minds by reading. There is no good in doing that unless you hold it also as a sacrifice for the whole world. For the world is one. You are rated a very insignificant part of it, and therefore it is right for you that you should serve your millions of brothers rather than aggrandize this little self." So he's drawing that same conclusion, that same teaching from death. If you're going to die, if your life is this short span, what is there in aggrandizing yourself just by feeding until you die? Why not take this short span of this apparent existence and spend it on the good of the millions of brothers and sisters around you? Why not lift your eyes off of your plate for a moment and take care of someone else? Live your life. Make this sacrifice. Make this fire that burns in you burn for the welfare of everyone around you. Become a servant. In this idea of death, Thakur is sitting there in his room, and one of his devotees, Manimohan, has lost his son, and everybody's trying to comfort him. And it says, although all the others poured forth their hackneyed phrases of consolation to Manimohan, the master was all the time merely listening to his words, listening closely to his words of grief without spreading anything whatever. When they saw that indifferent mood of his, some of the devotees were surprised and thought how hard, how devoid of compassion his heart must be. So Manimohan comes to the lecture today, weeping. His son has died. And everybody's standing around him, patting him on the back, saying whatever they're going to say, whatever. You can never actually say something that actually comforts somebody in that situation. And so, but you can't say nothing either. You're compelled to say something. So the ego jumps in and starts just throwing out stuff, life is temporary. He's in heaven. God will take care of him. All will be well. The master doesn't do this. The master listens quietly, listens very closely. And as he was listening to the words of the old man, the master gradually passed into ecstasy, a state of divine semi-consciousness. Suddenly, with the pose and energy of a wrestler, he struck his left arm just below his shoulder, and with the palm of his right hand stood up and began singing in unprecedented vigor, "O man, prepare yourself for battle. There, see death entering your house in battle array. Ride on the chariot of great virtue. Harness to it the two horses of devotion and spiritual practice. Stretch up that bow of knowledge and set the unfailing arrow of the love of God." I wish I was a good enough actor to pull that off. Can you imagine? Manimohan's weeping, everybody's trying to console him, the master's just sitting there listening. People begin to notice the master is not doing anything, not helping at all. And then out of nowhere, he just stands up, with this amazing boldness, smacks his arm, and but very loudly with unprecedented vigor. I imagine that's quite energetic. Says to him, "O man, prepare yourself for battle. There, see death entering your house in battle array. Ride on that chariot of great virtue. Harness to it the two horses of devotion and spiritual practice. Stretch up the bow of knowledge and set the unfailing arrow of the love of God." This is the result of having death as your teacher. And this is what the master wants you to learn as you sit here in this room, the waiting room of Yama, the waiting room of death, taking him on as your teacher, wanting to open your eyes, saying that you want to know the truth and that you want to know God. that you're going to face this death and you're going to stand up to it, and Thakur is not going to pit-pat around, and make it easy. He's telling you exactly what you need. The first, he says, ride on that chariot of great virtue. Swamiji signed a photo one time, and on that photo, he said, virtue is the only friend which follows us even beyond the grave. So live a life of virtue. What is virtue? That which makes you stronger. That which makes those around you stronger. Take up that chariot. Make that what carries your life forward. Making yourself stronger, making those around you stronger, living for the uplift and the well-being of those around you. The word for virtue in Sanskrit, vira, it's the word for heroic. You see that in Thakur's response here as he stands up and says, get on the chariot of virtue. Get on there. Do it. No one can separate himself from his brother, Vivekananda says. All that unites with the universal is virtue. All that separates us is sin. You are a part of that infinite. This is your nature. Stand up. I really like that idea. None of this mealy-mouthed religion, boldness. Vivekananda is awesome for that. Stand up. Make your life something of virtue. Make it worthwhile. Stop living there throwing peanuts into your own mouth, growing fat on all the offerings that you are unconsciously piling on this fire inside of you. Growing fat in your lethargy of thinking and your laziness of life. Knock it off. Stand up. Pull your virtue together. Get in that chariot and go forward. Ride on that chariot of great virtue. Harness to it 2 horses, devotion and spiritual practice. Get them going. Thakur stands up and sings a beautiful song. Dive deep in the sweetness of God's bliss. What need have we of his infinite creation and unlimited glory? Dive deep, O mind, in the ocean of God's beauty. If you descend to the uttermost depths, there you will find that gem of love. Go, seek, O mind. Seek Vrindavan in your heart, where with his loving devotees Sri Krishna sports eternally. Light up, O mind. Light up true wisdom's shining lamp and let it burn with a steady flame, unceasingly within that heart. Who is it that steers your boat across the solid earth? It is your guru, says Kabir. Meditate on his holy feet. Go in, find that devotion. Where? In that cave of the heart, where God meets material world under your name, where that fire of sacrifice burns. Dive deep, O mind, into the love of God. Drink deeply of that bliss. Understand the infinity of that nature. And stop it with this lackadaisical, blinded view of your life, of your living. Pick up that bow of knowledge. What is that knowledge? M learned the hard way in that first meeting with Sri Ramakrishna when he said his wife was ignorant. And Thakur said, oh, and you are a man of knowledge. And M says at that point, he said M had yet to learn the distinction between knowledge and ignorance. Up to this time, his conception had been that one got knowledge from books and schools. Later on, he gave up this false conception. He was taught that to know God is knowledge, and not to know him is ignorance. When Sri Ramakrishna exclaimed, "Are you a man of knowledge?" M's ego was again badly shocked. Stand up. Learn something about your nature. Become a man, become a woman who lives for the welfare of others. Not one of these fat parasites of consumerism. That always has offended me, even long before I was religious. The fact that we were all willing to be referred to as consumers again and again and again and again, that didn't offend us. That I was reduced to a consumer. No longer a human being, just this fat, gelatinous thing that they count on to consume. Take, eat. And we've built a whole culture, we've built a whole civilization around it, and we've reduced ourselves to it, and we've been content with it. We go stand in line for Black Friday, maybe even beat somebody up to get in there first. Oh, God help us, what we've become and have been willing to become. Stop it. For the love of the God that is in you, stop it. Grow up and be a man, be a woman. Know that divinity, feel that divinity, and live a life of that divinity. Live for the welfare of others. Rise up and overcome this little nature that sits there doing nothing for the sake of nothing until it's dead. Rise up. Yama said, choose sons and grandsons who shall live 100 years. Choose elephants, horses, herds of cattle, gold. Choose a vast domain on earth. Live here as many years as you desire. If you deem any other boon equal to that, choose it. Choose wealth. Choose a long life. Be a king, O Nachiketa. Be a king of the whole wide earth. I will make you the enjoyer of all desires. Whatever desires are difficult to satisfy in this world of mortals, choose them if you wish. These fair maidens with their chariots, their musical instruments, men cannot obtain them. I give them to you, and they shall wait upon you. But do not ask me about death. It's your choice. You sitting here tonight in the waiting room of death, he will visit you. You say you want to know the truth. You say you want to know your nature. You say you want to know the secret of death, the reality of this world, and death is offering you anything but. Offering you anything but. No, I'll give you a promotion. No, I'll give you a much better wife. I'll give you more children. I'll give you a huge salary. Pray for anything else. Spend your life in the pursuit of anything else. I'll give it to you. I don't care how big it is. You're in the United States of America, the richest country on the planet has seen in a long time. More opportunities than many will ever have. Come, ask for that. Spend your life on that. I'll give that to you. But don't ask me about these spiritual things. Don't ask me about the meaning of death, the reality of the soul. Don't search for those things. Nachiketa says, but O death, these endure only until tomorrow. Furthermore, they exhaust the vigor of all the sense organs. Even the longest life is short indeed. Keep your horses, keep your dances, and keep your songs for yourself. Wealth can never make a man happy. Moreover, since I have beheld you, I shall certainly obtain wealth, and I shall certainly live as long as you rule. Therefore no boon will be accepted by me but the one that I have asked. Who among decaying mortals here below, having approached the undecaying immortals, and coming to know that this higher needs may be fulfilled by them, who of them would exult in a long life after he had pondered on the pleasures arising from beauty and song? Tell me, O death, of the great hereafter, about which man has his doubts. This is renunciation. This is what you're called to. If you want to know this secret, you have to be single-minded in your pursuit. And when the world offers you all of the alternatives, tantalizes you with all of the possible pleasures, calls you to make sacrifices that put up a very different prayer, it's up to you. You can have them. All of the maidens of the heavenly sphere, I'm sure there's a male equivalent of that too for the ladies. Whatever you want. This world will give it to you. Just stop pursuing this spiritual notion. Stop pursuing this higher knowledge. Spend more time studying to get a better degree, Spend more time looking for a better job. Learn a few more skills so that you can get a better part. All of those things are there, and they're yours. It's up to you. You can have that divine nature. You can have that infinity. You can have that immortality, or not. Nachiketas knew what he wanted. Nachiketas knew he took death on as his teacher. He measured the importance of the way he lived by the fact that this body would die. And he understood that there was nothing in his father's sacrifice that was worthy of the eternal. There was nothing that he could spend his prayers on that would be worthy of the infinite love of the divine, the knowledge that he and the universe were one, that he was the highest manifestation of love in his essence, that he could have that eternal satisfaction that comes only from the knowledge of that oneness. That's the choice. That's the story of Nachiketas. That's the challenge of living with a sacrificial fire burning in your heart every day, offering to the divine everything that you spend your time on.
Many thanks, dear Chidbrahmananda ji, for this beautiful talk. Actually, he had spoken on this very topic in Boston, and I had the privilege to attend that too. But what he spoke here was, the main theme is same, but he told many things that he didn't speak at Boston. He has thrown many beautiful ideas that we need to ponder about, and as we ponder over them, the meaning and the utility of all these will actually manifest in our lives. We have a minute or two. If you have a quick question, then Swami can provide a quick answer to that. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Oh, Swamiji, you have explained things so well. Nobody seems to have any doubt and any question. So now we shall move. Oh, you have a question, Carol? Oh my goodness.
Yes, because he was lost in ignorance. It wasn't a youngster, it was Mani Mohan, and he was not an older man, but old enough to be the father of a young man who had died. And he was overcome with grief, overcome with sorrow. So he was fully identified with the body, trapped in this set of restrictions and limitations that has a name on it. So he was caught in that and suffering from the fact that death had apparently taken his son. And there's no comfort for that. You know, there is, if you think that way about yourself, if you see death as real like that, with no understanding of your nature or the nature of the person that died, if you don't understand that, you're just overcome. You're just a victim. This world will be, you'll just be a victim of, it'll be a world of victimhood for you. And Thakur is standing up and taking a very different tack, saying, don't be a victim. Fight the ignorance. That's what he's being told to do. Fight the notion that this is it, that this is the reality. Take up it with vigor. Take up the virtues, of service, of spending your life on others, so that you might be purified, and that understanding will be clear to you that's your nature. That's your nature. Yeah.
Mentions that we are the eyes and ears and senses of God, and what we take in is transmitted. And she was saying virtually the same thing in her own words and trees.
Yes. Yes. Truth is one. Sages describe it in many ways. But no, these things, that's the beautiful thing about that idea of faith that Vimalananda talks about there that I really like. I grew up thinking faith, or being taught that faith was believing something without reason, just flat out, just accepting it without evidence. it was a great relief to me to find out that that's not necessary. That this world, if you shine that light of awareness on it, I've said this so many times this weekend, if you shine that light of awareness on the knots of Maya, they will undo themselves. It's up to you to be aware, to be focused, to see clearly. And to do that, you have to make sure your lens is well polished. So, and to do that means that you're living a chaste life, that you're going after the virtues, that you're living a life of service, focusing on the well-being of others and not the satiation of senses, which will cloud your ability to see clearly, which will not let the knots of Maya untie, will in fact tighten them up good and hard. I remember big memory of mine. I don't know why it was so big, because it was a small thing. I was about 5 years old, and I had been given a marionette for Christmas, and it had been thrown in my toy box in the toy room, and I decided I wanted to play with it, and I pulled it out, and of course it was just a tangled mess, and I thought it was ruined, and I started crying, and I remember carrying it into my dad like a corpse and handing it to him and say, it's broken, and then watching in mesmerization as my father took the limbs and put them through this string and took the arm and put it around that string and took the handle and put it through there, and my marionette was fixed, was all better, was working again, and I was thrilled, the magic of my dad. And that's the positive side of our situation, is that we have the divine in us. We can take our tangled marionette, this life that we've lived up until this point that's been tossed in our toy box, and we can go to Mother and say, it's not working, I'm unhappy, things aren't going well. And not even knowing what's wrong, Mother will take those things and untie the knots of Maya and set you free, And Thakur is saying, do that, do that for the well-being of others.